My name is John Kiriakou. I was a field agent for the CIA. I hunted, tracked, and captured terrorists around the world. This is everything I'm authorized to tell you. I'm not allowed to say how many officers or what percentage of CIA officers are dedicated to counterterrorism. After 9/11, the CIA became a paramilitary organization. We started borrowing special forces guys. They would be on loan to the CIA to just fly somewhere, kill somebody, and then fly back for the next Tuesday meeting. The most obvious risk of working as a counterterrorism officer, obviously, is the risk of death. There were two guys who I worked with in CTC, the Counterterrorism Center, Helga Bose and Mike Spann, who were killed in the line of duty. And it wasn't just them. I was the chief of the counterintelligence branch in the Osama bin Laden group. The woman that I sat next to was killed in the line of duty in the Khost bombing in Afghanistan. The suicide bomber, he blew her and 6 of our colleagues up. So death, destruction, but on an equally personal note, your marriage is probably not going to survive an operational tour in the Directorate of Intelligence. The stress is just otherworldly. It's the most difficult and dangerous thing you can do as a CIA officer for a variety of reasons. First, when people join terrorist groups, they do that because they are true believers. And in most cases, they hate you or what you stand for more than they love life itself. And so they are very happy to die for a cause. At the same time, if you're working counterterrorism issues, you generally aren't doing it in London or Paris or Ottawa. You're doing it in Yemen, Somalia, Afghanistan, Pakistan. In Pakistan, unless you were going to carry out an operational act, you had to stay on the compound. It was just simply too dangerous. And so not only do you have this exceedingly difficult job to do, but you have to blend in and not attract attention to yourself and keep yourself safe at the same time. I'll give you an example. When I was stationed in Athens, Athens was one of the most dangerous places in the world for Americans, especially for American CIA officers. 17 November had murdered the CIA station chief, 2 U.S. defense attachés, and a hapless Air Force technical sergeant. This was a very, very lethal group. And so that was my primary job, to work against an incredibly deadly group. And I was the go-to guy on Arab terrorism there because I spoke Arabic. And I drove an armored car, level 4 armor. I carried 2 guns. I had a Glock 9mm on my waist and a Smith & Wesson 38 on my ankle. I even kept a buck knife in my back pocket just in case everything turned to and that's all I had left. Halfway through my tour, the British Embassy received a new defense attaché. His name was Stephen Saunders. He was a 1-star general, brigadier general. Everybody loved him. Everybody liked to be around him, the life of the party. He loved being on camera. So anytime you're at some event and there's a camera, Stephen would run up to the camera and give an interview. Which is, great if you're not in a country that's categorized as critical threat for terrorism. I took delivery of this new BMW 540, fully armored. And so we were at a cocktail party the day that I got the car. And I was standing there with Stephen. He was making fun of me and he says, "You Americans, you're so obsessed with security. It's a NATO country. What are you so afraid of?" And they all chuckled. And I said, "You Brits live in a dream world. If you think because they have palm trees and pretty beaches that they're not going to kill you if they have the chance." And we all laughed again. And then a couple of weeks later, I made a mistake that I had never made before. I slept through my alarm. I had to just get on the main road and go straight to the embassy. And it was straight down this direct road called Kiriakou Boulevard. So I get on Kiriakou to go straight down the mountain and get to the embassy, turn on the radio, I'm listening to some music, and this announcer comes on and he says, "Avoid Kiriakou Boulevard. There was a terrorist attack at Philothée." I had definitely never heard that. But when he said it, I see this white Rover in the far left lane. There's blood all over the interior of the windows. And I can see when I get close enough that the driver's side window has been shot out. And Stephen Saunders drives a white Rover. It turned out that they had taken him to a hospital that was next door to the British Embassy, and he died there about 20 minutes later. I mean, we knew who did it. It was Revolutionary Organization 17 November. Now, 17 November usually would drop a manifesto at the site of the assassination, or they would mail one to a leftist newspaper. My boss runs into my office and he says, "Did you see the manifesto for the Saunders hit?" He says, "It mentions you." I said, "Come on, not possible." Like, seriously, nobody took security as seriously as I did. And he shows it to me, and it says in Greek, "We saw the big spy, but he was driving an armored car, and we knew he was armed. So we elected to carry out the revolutionary sentence on the war criminal Saunders." And he said, "You got to go. We're going to take you to the airport. You're going to go home. We'll pick up your kids. We'll pick up your wife. We'll pack at your house. So we flew out. The night before that happened was the last night I spent in a house with my wife. And we were divorced soon after. She was just like, yeah, I'm not doing this anymore. Assets are critically important to counterterrorism because, as an American CIA officer, I'm not going to be able to infiltrate a group directly. I was one of only a handful of CIA officers who spoke fluent Arabic. Even with my fluent Arabic, I spoke with an accent. So John's not going to be able to put on a thobe and a dishdasha and walk into a terrorist training camp and volunteer. That's just not real life. It doesn't happen. And so your job is to recruit someone who is either a member of a terrorist group or can become a member of a terrorist group so that you can use his information to disrupt future attacks. There are a million different types of people that you might want to consider recruiting. But if you recruit a bona fide terrorist, someone who is able to get into the group, you're going to meet with him once a month for hours probably, and he's going to give you 5, 6, 10 different intelligence reports. This is what they're talking about. This is what they're planning. They want to do an attack in Bali or whatever. That's the stuff that you want to get. When I was training as a case officer, one of my instructors said to me that he had gone through his entire 30-plus year career in operations, and he never, ever had a target say no to a recruitment. And I said, you must be like some kind of a magical wizard of recruitment. And he laughed and he said, no. When you eventually say, listen, I'm not really, the economic officer here. I'm really a CIA officer. When you drop that cover, you have to be certain that they're not going to run screaming from the room, calling for the police, reporting you to their ambassador. You're going to get arrested. You're going to get expelled. Your career is going to come to a halt. You have to be 100% sure. That's where you take them to lunch, you take them to dinner, you spend weekends together, you do day trips, your wives become friends, your kids are playing together, to the point where you have figured out by now whether he has a vulnerability, and a vulnerability can mean a lot of different things. Maybe he just really, really loves his kids. That can be a vulnerability, because then that allows me to say, I see how much you love your kids. I know you want your kids to go to the best schools. I can literally get your kid into Harvard. And I'll pay for it too, by the way. And he says, well, what do you want in exchange? Well, I want the plans to that new Russian tank. I'd really like to get a peek at it. Another vulnerability would be, maybe the guy's wife has cancer, but you can get her into the Mayo Clinic where she can get the best cancer treatment on the planet. Maybe the guy's a drinker or a gambler, even better, and he's always short of money because he's maybe embezzling a little bit from the embassy. 95% of recruitments are made for the money. Sometimes it's ideology, sometimes it's this desire for excitement. They love James Bond, they want to be a part of it. And sometimes it's for revenge. They hate their boss, they hate their country, they hate their leader. You've got to develop that target to the point where he comes to believe that you are his best friend. To the point where in your heart, he's willing to commit espionage for you. The resources at the CIA are virtually unlimited. In exchange, though, the information has to be incredible, let's say, but you have access to the location of the leader of Al-Qaeda, and we're able to break down the door and grab the guy. There's a reward for you of between $10 and $25 million that we will pay in cash, in gold, in diamonds, in land, any way you want to receive it. But the budget is going to be there if the information's good. I made a recruitment one time. I heard from a source a group of members of a terrorist cell were meeting for coffee in the same coffee house. Every single day, 10 o'clock, they'd go for coffee, which is a terrible thing to do by way of tradecraft, right? Never establish a pattern. I started going there at 9:30 in the morning. So sure enough, 10 o'clock, they came in, 4 or 5 of them. And one of them turned and looked at me. I did that for a week. I started the second week. Every day, 9:30, I'm sitting there with my Arabic newspaper. And this time one of them nodded at me. So I nodded back to him. And then one day, he came in by himself. And he sits down, and we start talking. And I ask him, how's his family? Oh, he said, my wife is in Cairo with my son and my daughter, and I've never met my son. He really was a family man. He was religious. He made some bad decisions and ended up in Afghanistan. And he just wanted to go home. And I said to him, if that's all you want, you just want to go home? I said, well, I can take care of that. To make a long story short, I recruited him. I got him his passport. I gave him some money to get himself established again and put him on a plane. And he gave me, in return, everything I had asked for. very specific information that we use to actively recruit other Al-Qaeda members. I asked him at the end of it, why did you let me recruit you? And he said, I've been here for 5 years, and you were the first person who ever asked me about my family. There are no tactics taught to help you ingratiate yourself with potential targets. You either have it in your gut or you don't. So a normal asset meeting, you go through the mad minute where you followed here, where you followed home last time. Do you have any problems, any concerns during the course of the month? And let's meet 1 month from tonight, at 8 o'clock at such and such a hotel. Then you sit down, you have a coffee. How was your month? How are things going? What have you heard? What do you think about this guy? What do you know about him? Do we need to be worried about him? Is he going to be in charge of the weapons cache? That kind of thing. It's not unusual for a meeting to last 2 or 3 hours. I was in a meeting once that lasted 8 hours. It could be at a safe house. It can be walking down the beach. Anywhere where you're going to be safe, and that will be private. There was one source I recruited. It was too dangerous to meet him in the country that I recruited him in, so we would fly to Europe, and we would meet in Europe once a month, and we would meet like 8 hours a day for 3 days. And then I would take a train to a different country, so it didn't look like we were both flying back from the same city at the same time, and it didn't arouse any suspicion. Yeah, some meetings by necessity are conducted in cars. And so sometimes you're going to have to do what's called a CPU, a car pickup. You want to be able to pick the person up at a spot where as few people as possible are going to see you. Maybe you're doing it in a semi-residential area where he's standing on a corner. You come down an alley instead of a main street. He jumps in the car and you take off. Let's say the meeting is at 2 o'clock. You want to be there between 1:58 and 2:02. And if you're there at 1:58 and he's not there, you do one more run. And if he's not there by 2:02, you abort the meeting and you try it again 24 hours later or 72 hours later, or whatever your agreement is. You don't want somebody to say, I wonder why that car keeps driving in a loop, and then they write down your license plate number. You don't want to come to anybody's attention. Double agents are indeed real. Double agents are a very, very big problem on both sides of the double. I was well into my career, and I had a great friend who was a station chief. He called me one day. I was at headquarters, and he called me from overseas, and he said, hey, I was hoping you could do me a favor. One of my guys has recruited a double agent. The double doesn't know that we know he's a double. The enemy country has instructed the double to demand to only speak with the station chief. And he said, I live here. It's too dangerous for me to meet with this guy. Can you fly out here and pretend to be me and handle the double agent? I said, of course. So I fly out and I meet with the guy. I meet him in some hotel. And I give him a big bear hug at first, which is unusually warm in the Middle East, but I needed to pat him down for weapons. And he didn't have any weapons. And so I made a big deal of taking off my jacket to show him that I didn't have any weapons. I sat down. We ordered some coffee from room service. He said, are you the chief? I said, you asked for him. You got him, buddy. I'm the chief. I would meet with him once a month. And this went on for about 6 months. We were getting, the take on everything that he was reporting back and what the enemy country was telling him to do. Finally, I'm at headquarters one day. I get a call from a sister agency. And the woman says, are you handling this double case? And I said, yeah. Listen, he's been instructed to kill you in the next meeting. I said, oh, come on. I said, the guy's afraid of shadow. He's not going to kill me. I know him well. He's a coward. He's not going to pull a gun and shoot me. But even if he were to pull a gun and shoot me, how about this? Usually, he calls me when he's coming into the lobby of the hotel. I'll tell him to come up to the room directly. And when he comes in, I'll prop the door open. When he comes in, I'll grab him, take him down. You guys burst in from the other room, and we get him. They reluctantly agreed with a proviso that I wear a bulletproof vest. I said, fine. So I fly back out, and 4 armed security guys in the lobby. And it turns out the bad guys have 4 armed security people in the lobby. And they're all kind of looking at each other sideways, like, who are these guys? What's that bulge on that guy's waist? That kind of thing. And they're all just kind of standing around staring at each other. So he calls me, the double. And I said, come up to room, whatever it is, 615. He comes to room 615. I've propped the door open. He comes in. I tackle him. He's trying to get the gun out of his waistband. I have his arm, his hand. My colleagues burst in from the side, and I'm just sitting on him. I have him pinned down on the floor, and I'm sitting on his chest. In the meantime, he's just like, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. And so my liaison partners gave him a shot of Demerol and knocked him out. We put him on a gurney and covered him up like he was dead. And we put him in the service elevator, took him down, put him in an ambulance, and we took him to intelligence service headquarters. He woke up 2 hours later, tied to a chair. I said, we can do it the easy way, we can do it the hard way. It's totally up to you. We know who you are. He was the leader of that country's Hezbollah wing. I said, we want all the weapons, all of them. We know that you're the keeper of the weapons. He's like, F you. So I said to Liaison, we should just break into his house. I mean, there's a good chance all these weapons are just in his house. And they said, we can't. He's got a live-in maid, and she doesn't know anything, and she never ever leaves the house. And I said, okay, well, let's just declare a gas leak in the neighborhood, and then we'll evacuate the cul-de-sac. And then we'll just go in, bring a locks and picks team in and just pick the lock. They said, no, we can't do that. We don't have gas lines in this country. We use propane. Bring a propane truck. We'll leak the propane. Then we'll just declare the emergency. The fire department comes. They evacuate all of the 6 houses. We break into his house and we find a safe, like a double-sized gun safe. It was enormous, the biggest gun safe I've ever seen. The weapons have to be in there. So we bring the locks and picks team in, and they've got, the stethoscope on, and they're doing the tumbler, and they crack the safe. They open it, and it's empty, except for this handwritten, like childlike handwritten map. So we get in these 2 Jeeps. We drive south, as the map tells us to do. We get out where it tells us to get out, and we found this bunker full to the ceiling with every weapon they had, landmines, hand grenades, rocket-propelled grenades, everything they had. We completely put Hezbollah out of business in that country. And as it turns out, he's still in prison 25 years later. An SDR is a surveillance detection route. This is something that literally every CIA officer must be trained in. This is what's going to keep you from being assassinated or arrested. And so you leave what's called your kickoff point. It could be home, the office, wherever you happen to be. You'll do one that's maybe 2 hours. If you're in a very hostile place, your SDR could be 8 hours. You're changing into pre-positioned cars, you're taking the subway, then you're walking, then you get in a different car, maybe you take an Uber for a little bit of it. An SDR comes in 4 different phases. The kickoff phase, you just go from your kickoff to point A. And then you do kind of it's called a stair step. Make a right, a left, a right, a left, a right, a left, to go to your next stop, which is maybe, it's a fabric store. When you're stair-stepping like that, you can definitely see if you're being followed. If you're being followed, you abort the meeting and you just drive home. And you do the whole thing again 24 hours later. If you are not sure you're being followed, you enter what's called the provocative phase, where you'll drive halfway up a block, then make a U-turn and drive back. Make a K-turn, drive back, pull into another driveway, make a K-turn. Stuff that doesn't make any sense at all. But that's just to make sure with 100% certainty that you're not being followed. I served overseas with a woman who was a legitimate State Department officer. She came into the office one day and she said, oh, I was under heavy surveillance last night. I took them on a ride that they'll never forget. I was going 100 miles an hour down the highway and I'm just sitting there listening. Because what happened was, they determined that because she tried so hard to lose them, she must be the CIA officer. And so they never ever surveilled me, because I'm going to the wine store and going to the fabric store and then I'm driving home. But they were plenty interested in her. You have to be very, very careful not to establish patterns. And I almost got myself burned twice. So there was one point where I was flying to Eastern Europe once a month to handle an asset that I had recruited. He was very proud of the village that he had come from. It was high up in the mountains, and there was a hunting lodge up there. He said, let's go to this hunting lodge. I remember it so fondly from my childhood, and they serve wild boar, and they serve bear stew, and all kinds of crazy stuff. So I went with him. I ordered a very unusual drink, which I shouldn't have, but it was something my grandmother used to drink, and I remembered it from my childhood, and he was talking about his childhood, so I ordered the drink, and the waitress brought it to me. The next month, I flew up to see him, and he said, let's go to the hunting lodge again. They have venison this time of the year, and it's really amazing. So we drive to the hunting lodge, and I order the drink, the same drink. And the waitress says, I remember you. And I said, no, I don't think so. I've never been here before. And she said, yes, you have. You're the only person who's ever ordered that drink. And I've been here for 10 years. I said, oh, that's right. I was here once before. It's like, doggone it. She spotted me. Now, she was just a waitress. But what if she had been an intelligence officer posing as a waitress? Or what if she was a police informant who's going to now rat me out to the local cops that I'm meeting with this, this guy? And so afterwards I said, I am so sorry. I blew it. We can never, ever go back there again. And we never did. In January of 2002, I was named chief of CIA counterterrorism operations in Pakistan. And there was a flood of Al-Qaeda fighters across the border into Pakistan. So I went out and I came up with this idea that instead of trying to catch them in these forbidding mountains, we'll catch 5, 10, 20 at a time in the safe houses. So that's the practice that we adopted. And then after I had been in Pakistan about 6 weeks, we got word that Abu Zubaydah was somewhere in Pakistan. We thought at the time, wrongly, that Abu Zubaydah was the number 3 in Al-Qaeda. If you wanted to be smuggled into Afghanistan to make jihad, he would smuggle you in. And finally, I asked headquarters to send a friend of mine out. He was a targeting analyst, somebody who pours through millions of bits of data to try to isolate the location of one person. I said, buddy, we're on the trail of Abu Zubaydah. And I said, but he's right ahead of us. We just can't catch him. Like sometimes we'd break down a door and there's a cigarette that's still lit. So I said, you gotta pin this down for me. We just can't find him. Finally, he came to me and he said, I can't get it down to any fewer than 14 sites. I said, 14 sites? We've never done more than 2 raids in a single night before. Like, this doesn't really help. So I cabled headquarters and I said, we're gonna need a big team. I asked for 36 people. I asked for a pallet of weapons and ammunition and cash and night vision goggles and more battering rams and you name it. And then the next day, a colleague of mine and 2 Pakistani officers started going from site to site to look at all 14 sites. We wanted to make sure we weren't driving into an ambush. Do they know we're coming tonight? Most of these places were little hovels, little one-room shacks made of concrete block or corrugated tin. It was miserable. We come out of the back end of the University of Faisalabad and there's this enormous yellow house, which corresponds with Site 12. And my Pakistani counterpart said, I can tell you right now, something bad is happening in there. He said, it's 100 degrees right now, and all their shutters are closed. They have to be broiling in there, but they want people to think there's nobody home. We caught dozens and dozens of people crammed into that house. We're going to the last site, and the analyst calls me, and he says, Abu Zubaydah just made a terrible mistake. He accessed his emails from a landline. I said, oh my God, and the landline is associated with an address. And he says, and it's Site 13. I still have chills thinking about it. And I said, we got him. So we drive to Site 13, but it's an empty field. I said, how can this be? We're sure that he's here, but there's no house here. It's just an empty field. And the Pakistani major laughs and he says, now this happens all the time. He calls a young technical officer, climbs the pole, goes through this head of wires, finds the wire, follows it down the pole, down the alley, and he says, it's that house right there. We all gathered. It was like 60, 70 of us, Pakistanis, FBI, CIA, we all gathered at the safe house. I stood on the coffee table and I said, okay, so rule number 1, we have to take him alive. And exactly as the clock strikes 2, break down the door, separate the women and children from the men, and take all the men to the Faisalabad jail. And so at 2 a.m., I was on the roof of the safe house with my buddy, and I looked at my watch and I said, 0200, here we go. And then we hear gunshots, and I said, that's not good. We jump into our car, we speed over to Site 13, and there are 3 people laying in the street. One is obviously dead. One looks like he's dead or he's going to be dead pretty soon. And the other one is screaming bloody murder. So I said, what happened? And this Pakistani policeman says, we got him, we got your man. And he points at the guy who's like almost dead. I didn't have time to scream at this guy that the order was to take him alive. What happened was Abu Zubaydah, a Syrian bomber, and Abu Zubaydah's bodyguard